Hello, everyone. Rich Caputo back here again to talk to you and give you an introduction to the first important work of English British literature, Beowulf. We already talked about Caedmon's Hymn and Dream of the Rood, and those were short and those were, noteworthy, but Beowulf is where most people will tell you British English literature begins. And that is kind of weird because, as we'll talk about in a bit, it does not take place in England, Britain, anywhere like that at all, even a little bit, and there is not one British person there in it at all. Like, no, there's none. So why is it considered the beginning of British and English literature? Really simply because it's written in Old English. The first type of language that could be considered remotely close to the English language. If you listen to the recording of Caedmon's Hymn, that's what it sounds like. And like I said, it doesn't really sound like English in any meaningful sense of the term. What I have here on the screen is a comic book version of Beowulf fighting Grendel. And I'm a big, huge comic book fan, comic book guy, so I figured I'd throw that up there. Here's the background I want you guys to know. Wish I could tell you who wrote Beowulf. No idea. No clue. No idea. Not even the slightest idea. So can't tell you that. I can't even really tell you when it was written with any degree of certainty. The extreme limits of when it was written, some people will tell you it was written as early as 600 when the reconversion of Britain to Christianity started. Some people will tell you it was written as late as 1100 AD. More likely, somewhere between 700 and 900 AD. What I can tell you with a lot of degree of certainty, is it had to have been written after like 520. Because there is a real event, it's not a huge deal in the poem, but there's a real event, a battle on a frozen lake that the poem talks about, that actually legitimately did happen, and we know for a fact it happened in 520 AD, so it absolutely had to have happened. The poem had to have been written after that. And here's where the poem came from. Well, the story of when remember I told you guys that after the Roman Empire pulled out of Britain, Britain got invaded left, right, up and down. Goths, Visigoths, Vandals, Jutes, Angles, Saxons, all sorts of people. Well, one of the people that invaded were the Germanic people. That's all you need to know, Germanic people. And they brought with them their languages, their culture, their stories, their folklore. And that's probably where the origins of the story of Beowulf started. It probably started as Germanic through Norse legend, myth, folklore. That's where the story of Beowulf probably happened. Or the origins of the story, the kernel of the story, the beginning of the story. Here is why people talk about and people study Beowulf. There are two ways of looking at it. Again, on some level, this is all about conversion. The old school way of looking at Beowulf was that it was just what I said. It was a pre-existing Germanic story that came over to Britain with the invasions. And when Christian missionaries got there, they took the story and kind of reworked it and kind of added Christian elements to it to kind of, like we've been talking about, ease the conversion process for pagan people. And for the longest time, that's how the story of Beowulf was looked at, for like hundreds of years. And then, in the early 1900s, J.R.R. Tolkien, yes, the exact same guy who wrote Lord of the Rings. Yes, he was a writer, but he was also a scholar of medieval history. he came up with an idea that maybe that's not really what happened with Beowulf. Maybe it wasn't a pre-existing Germanic story that was reworked by Christians as like conversion propaganda. Maybe the story of Beowulf happened or developed just the way we have it. Maybe it was written with a mixture of pagan and Christian elements. And that's the big thing we're going to take away from Beowulf, that it's a snapshot of a pagan world becoming Christian. And for a while, no one really thought Tolkien was right. No one thought his idea was took his idea seriously. Until an archaeological discovery was made. It was made, I love saying this word, I love it. It was made at a place called Sutton Hoo. Just say it, Sutton Hoo. It's fun to say. And what was found at Sutton Hoo was a burial. And it was the burial of a king. And in this king's grave, or buried with him, were pagan artifacts and Christian artifacts buried right along beside him at the same time. And based on that, people started thinking, well, maybe Tolkien was right. Maybe for a while, Britain was part pagan and part Christian. And if you think about it, that sort of makes sense. People cling to their religion. People believe in that's what makes it religion. People believe in it. People hang on to it. People don't like to be told their religion is wrong. And if a people have been believing in paganism for like 2,000 years, however long they've been believing in it, it's going to take a while for them to let go of paganism and embrace Christianity. And there's a very, like, for example, the three things you're not supposed to talk about at like bars or barbershops because people get touchy are politics, sports, and religion. And there was some university did a study a couple years ago. Out of those three, which are people most likely to change first? Their political party, their sports team, or their religion? Give you a second to figure out which one people were most willing to change first. Believe it or not, it was political party, then sports team, and the one people clung to the most was their religion. And that's today, 21st century. Go back to whenever you want to say Beowulf was written, let's say 700, not to 900. People still clung to the religion. You could probably argue they clung to the religion even more tightly. So, can we ever know? Is Beowulf a pagan story that was reworked by Christian missionaries? Or did it happen just kind of, did Beowulf come about just the way we have it now? Was it part pagan and part Christian because that's the way it was written? Honestly, we'll never ever know, but I think now most people, I certainly think this, that it was very much a snapshot of a pagan world turning Christian. There were some people who believed in Christianity, some people who believed in paganism. They mixed together, and that's the world that Beowulf reflects, a world that was a pagan world turning into Christian. So when you guys read Beowulf, that's kind of one of the things I want us to look out for. What pagan elements do you see in Beowulf? What Christian elements do you see in Beowulf? That's going to be the big upshot of it. So kind of pay attention. I think that's what the discussion question is going to be about. So keep an eye out for that. And after you guys read Beowulf, I will have another video in which we talk about some of the things that I think are most interesting in Beowulf. Weirdly, we're going to end up talking about Bigfoot a little bit. We'll talk about dragons and what dragons represent in fairy tales. So read Beowulf, and I will check back in with you guys when you're done. Thanks.